My parents had left town for the weekend, leaving me home alone by the canal. It was the kind of opportunity I couldn't pass up. I invited Jenna, a girl I'd been getting to know better, to spend the night with me. The plan was simple: have dinner together, watch a movie, and maybe enjoy some of the tranquility the house by the canal offered. My parents' house had always been a refuge. Secluded, with the view of the canal stretching out from the living room window, it had a sense of peace that was hard to find in the city. Even so, the isolation had its unsettling side. I always found it comforting to know that when the door was closed, we were completely cut off from the outside world. Jenna arrived in the early evening, and the mood between us was light and easygoing. We had dinner together, and the conversation flowed naturally. After dinner, we settled on the living room couch, letting the soft sound of the canal's water and the cool breeze coming through the open window create the perfect setting for a relaxing night. As we watched the movie, the sky darkened completely, and the canal became a strip of silent darkness next to the house. Everything was going as planned. The night was calm, and I felt at peace, enjoying Jenna's company. We were halfway through the movie when Jenna noticed something strange. "Did you see that?" she asked, looking toward the window facing the canal. I paused the movie and turned to see what she was talking about. Outside, in the darkness, a faint light was flickering. I watched for a few seconds, trying to figure out what it was until I realized it was coming from a flashlight. "It must be someone on the canal," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. But even as I spoke, I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something unsettling about the sight of that solitary light bobbing in the dark water. The light got closer, and soon we could see the figure of a man in a kayak, paddling slowly toward our house. He seemed to be exploring the area with a flashlight, the beam moving from side to side, briefly illuminating the canal's edge and then returning to the water. At first, I saw no reason for alarm. It was common to see people using the canal for nighttime paddles, especially during the summer. But something about him bothered me. Maybe it was how late it was, or the way he seemed to be focused on our house. Jenna, beside me, also began to look uncomfortable. When the man noticed we were watching, he turned off the flashlight and waved, paddling closer to the shore. The tension in the air heightened as he got so close that we could hear the water lapping against the kayak. "Hey," he called out, his voice carried by the night breeze. "I'm hurt, injured my hand, and I'm hungry. Could you help me out?" I was torn. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part, the one listening to all the instincts of self-preservation, said something was wrong. Jenna shifted uncomfortably beside me. "I don't like this," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the man who was now just standing in the water, staring directly at us. I knew she was right. Still, the idea of ignoring someone in need didn't sit well with me. "I'll grab something for him," I told her, trying to sound confident, but the discomfort was palpable. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a granola bar and a bottle of water, and returned to the door that led to the deck. When I opened the door, the night breeze hit me, and I looked at the man, who was now standing by the shore, holding the kayak with one hand. "I'll leave this here for you," I said, approaching the edge of the deck, but not going down the steps that led to the canal. But as I placed the food on the ground and turned to go back, he made his move. With a speed I didn't expect, he dropped the kayak and ran toward the deck, trying to climb up. Panic overtook me, and everything clicked into place. The cry for help, the flashlight, it was all a ruse to lure me outside. "He's trying to get in," I shouted, quickly retreating into the house and slamming the door shut. Jenna was right behind me, locking the door and pulling the curtains with trembling hands. The man pounded on the glass door, furious that he couldn't get inside. The glass door shook violently as the man from the canal slammed against it again. Jenna was pale, her eyes wide with fear. My heart was racing, but I knew we couldn't panic. We needed to act quickly. "Lock all the doors and windows," I yelled, running through the house. Jenna followed me, and together we went from room to room, making sure every entrance was secure. The man kept pounding on the door, trying to force it open. But fortunately, the locks held. The sound of the door creaking under the force of the blows filled me with dread. I knew that if he got inside, we'd be in serious danger. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a baseball bat my dad kept in the closet. I had only ever used it for a few games in the backyard, but now it was the only thing that made me feel even a little prepared for whatever was coming next. As I steeled myself for the worst, Jenna called the police, frantically explaining the situation. I could hear the fear in her voice as she tried to stay calm and give all the details. The dispatcher promised to send a patrol car, but warned us that because of the house's location, it might take a few minutes. Minutes that, at that moment, felt like hours. The man outside finally gave up on the glass door. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the pounding. Where had he gone? What was he doing now? Jenna and I exchanged tense glances, the tension growing with each passing second. Then, we heard footsteps around the house. He was trying to find another way in. The sound moved quickly, sometimes near the living room, sometimes close to the kitchen. Every time we heard a noise, we held our breath, hoping he wouldn't manage to break in. Panic completely overtook me when I heard the sharp sound of glass breaking. I ran to the bedroom window and saw the man trying to break through one of the side doors with a rock, the glass already starting to crack. Jenna grabbed my arm, desperate. "He's getting in," she cried. Knowing the situation was on the verge of spiraling out of control, I gripped the baseball bat tighter, ready to use it if necessary. But before the glass could shatter, we heard something that made the man stop. Sirens. The red and blue lights cut through the darkness of the night, illuminating the front of the house and the canal. The man, realizing his time was up, dropped the rock and ran toward the canal, jumping into the kayak and paddling frantically away. I stood still on high alert, as the patrol cars pulled up at the house. The officers quickly got out, shining their flashlights toward the canal, but the man had already disappeared into the darkness. The week had been one of those that left me exhausted, and all I wanted was to unwind. I decided that a beachside bar would be the perfect place to do that. The sound of the waves gently lapping against the shore, the salty breeze in the air, and a cold beer in hand. It was exactly what I needed. I arrived at the bar shortly after sunset. It was one of those small, cozy places with soft yellow lights and mellow music playing in the background. I sat at the counter, ordered a drink, and started watching the scene. I wasn't there to socialize, but soon enough, two guys sat next to me and struck up a conversation. Hardin and James were clearly older than me, probably in their 40s, but they had an energy that made me feel at ease. Hardin was the more outgoing of the two, with an easy smile and a loud laugh that echoed through the bar. James, on the other hand, was more reserved but still friendly, with a posture that suggested confidence. They told me they were regulars at the bar whenever they were in town and knew the area well. As the conversation flowed, we hit it off. I hadn't planned anything for that night, and the two seemed genuine and fun. We drank together, talked about life, work, relationships, the usual topics that come up when you're relaxing and in no hurry. The night was going well, and before we knew it, it was past midnight. That's when Hardin decided it was time to call it a night. He bid us farewell with a firm handshake and left the bar. James, however, suggested we continue the night somewhere else. I hesitated for a moment. Something about continuing the night made me slightly uncomfortable, but James seemed so friendly and laid back that I decided to ignore the feeling. Maybe it was just the alcohol talking, I thought. I ended up accepting the invitation. We left the bar and walked along the beach, chatting and laughing like old friends. The following week, I received a message from James inviting me out again. He suggested we return to the same beach bar, saying he enjoyed our conversation and that it would be nice to relax together again. I found it odd that Hardin hadn't been in touch, but James explained that he was busy with work. Without giving it much thought, I accepted the invitation. James had come across as a decent guy the last time, so I figured it would be another chill evening. When I arrived at the bar, James was already there, sitting in the same spot as the previous week. He greeted me with a smile and a beer in hand, motioning for me to join him. The night was calm, the bar quieter than before, but the atmosphere was still welcoming. We ordered a few drinks and started chatting. James was a good conversationalist, and soon we were laughing and talking about everything, from sports to travel. Everything seemed normal until James suggested trying a special drink that the bartender had recommended. "It's strong, but worth it," he said, pushing the glass toward me. I wasn't one to turn down a good drink, so I accepted without a second thought. The taste was a bit bitter, but I didn't suspect anything. I kept drinking and chatting with James, but gradually I started to notice something strange. My vision began to blur, and James's words seemed to drag, as if he were speaking more slowly. My head felt heavy, and the room around me started to spin slightly. I tried to focus, but it was as if a veil was falling over my senses, obscuring everything. I looked at James, expecting some explanation, but the smile on his face had changed. It was no longer the friendly smile from before. There was something sinister in his expression now, a gleam in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. The realization hit me, but it was too late. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't respond properly. My hands trembled, and the room seemed to be closing in on me. "Relax," James said, his voice sounding distant yet uncomfortably close at the same time. "You'll be fine. You just need to rest a bit." He stood up calmly and grabbed my arm as if to help me, but his touch made me feel even more vulnerable. I tried to resist, but my body wouldn't obey. Everything started to go dark, and before I could react, I lost consciousness completely. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the bar anymore. I woke up in a strange place, my head pounding and my vision still blurry. The surroundings were shrouded in shadows, and the only light came from a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow. It took me a few seconds to realize I was lying on a bed with sheets that smelled of mold. The sense of panic grew as reality set in. I wasn't at the bar. I wasn't at home. I was somewhere unfamiliar. I tried to get up, but my body was weak, my legs barely responding. The room was small, with bare walls and a single closed door. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, blocking out any sign of outside light. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the whole situation had a claustrophobic feel to it. Suddenly, I heard voices outside the door. I tried to focus, but the headache and numbness made it difficult to understand what they were saying. I caught fragments of conversation. James was outside, talking to someone, possibly Hardin. They were whispering urgently, but what I heard made my stomach turn. "We have to finish the job," James was saying, his voice tinged with urgency. "We can't let this drag on." My heart raced. Finish the job? What the hell did that mean? Nothing good, certainly. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't stay there waiting to find out what they planned to do with me. I looked around, desperately searching for a way out. My mind was foggy, but adrenaline gave me strength. There was a small window in the corner of the room, partially covered by a dirty curtain. With effort, I got up and made my way to it, trying not to make any noise. My legs were shaking, and my vision was still a bit blurred, but fear drove me forward. The window was locked, but with a desperate pull, I managed to undo the latch. The sound of James and Hardin's voices outside the door was growing louder, and I knew I didn't have much time. As I started to open the window, I heard footsteps approaching. They were about to enter the room. With one last tug, I opened the window enough to squeeze through. Without looking back, I began forcing my body out, my sweaty hands slipping on the windowsill. I was almost out when the door to the room burst open, and James came rushing in. "Hey!" he shouted, but I was already outside, falling onto the hard ground outside the house. I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder, but I didn't stop. With the last bit of energy, I got up and ran, adrenaline pushing me forward, numbing any pain or exhaustion. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away from that house. James and Hardin's voices faded as I ran through the dark streets. I was alone, in an unfamiliar part of town, but the feeling of being away from them was all that mattered. Finally, I came across a man walking down the street, and my vision began to darken again. I collapsed on the ground before I could ask for help, but not before hearing him call out to someone. My mind went blank again, but this time, I felt I was safe. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital. A nurse told me I had been found unconscious and that the police were on their way. The panic was still there, but the relief of being away from that house was overwhelming. I kept thinking about Hardin and James. Who were they really? Why had they done this? Questions that would haunt me for a long time. After some time, I received an unexpected visit. Hardin showed up at the hospital, apparently relieved that I was alive. He began to speak, his voice trembling, revealing secrets I hadn't expected to hear. He told me he had gotten involved in something dark with James, but had tried to protect me when he saw things were going too far. James was dangerous, much more than I had imagined. Hardin explained that he had initially been part of James's activities, but when he realized his friend was becoming increasingly unpredictable and violent, he tried to distance himself. That night at the bar, Hardin knew something was wrong, but James was quicker. He tried to warn me, but ended up being dragged into something he could no longer control. I didn't know if I could trust Hardin, but it was clear he had information that could help the police catch James. As I listened, I realized my life had been hanging by a thread that night, and that maybe, in a twisted way, Hardin had indeed saved me. I've always enjoyed biking through the woods near my house. It was my refuge, a place where I could disconnect from the world and connect with nature. The trail wound its way through dense trees, crossing streams and clearings that, in the sunlight, looked like something out of a fairy tale. It was the perfect setting to forget the stress of everyday life. That afternoon, the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. The air was crisp, and the leaves on the trees swayed gently in the breeze. Everything seemed ideal for a peaceful ride. I grabbed my bike, put on my helmet, and headed for the trail. I had ridden that path dozens of times. I knew every curve, every climb, and descent. It was the kind of place that brought me peace. I pedaled through the first few kilometers without a hurry, enjoying the view and the sound of birds. The sun filtered through the treetops, creating patterns of light and shadow on the trail. I was completely at ease, immersed in the tranquility that the environment provided. However, as I continued, I noticed something strange. The weather, which had been perfect, began to change abruptly. As I advanced along the trail, the discomfort I felt only grew. The silence around me was oppressive, and the sensation of being watched became increasingly intense. I looked around, trying to find some explanation, but all I saw were the dark trees, standing still as if they were frozen in a photograph. I started pedaling a bit faster, trying to shake off the unease, but the trail that had once been so familiar now seemed strange, almost hostile. Every turn felt tighter, and the shadows between the trees grew deeper, as if they were hiding something I couldn't see. My mind tried to rationalize, telling me it was just a change in the weather, but my instincts said otherwise. And then I saw it. Up ahead, in the middle of the trail, a humanoid figure stood still. At first, I thought it was just a tree trunk or a strangely cast shadow, but as I got closer, it became clear that it was something much more sinister. The figure was tall, thin, almost skeletal, and seemed partially hidden by the surrounding trees. It didn't move, but I felt it watching me back, as if it had been waiting for me. I suddenly stopped my bike, my heart racing. I froze, not knowing what to do. My mind screamed for me to turn around and get out of there as fast as I could, but my body seemed paralyzed with fear. The figure made no sound, didn't move. It was just there, like it was part of the woods themselves. I couldn't make out any details, whether it had a face, eyes, or any other human features. The only thing I could discern was the general shape of something that shouldn't be there. Finally, I mustered the strength to act. Without taking my eyes off the figure, I started to slowly back away, trying not to make any sudden movements. But then, in a gesture that made my blood run cold, the figure took a step toward me. Panic overtook me, and without a second thought, I turned my bike around and started pedaling with all the strength I had, trying to leave that thing behind. The trail, which once felt long and peaceful, now became a path I needed to escape as quickly as possible. I knew I had to reach home before that thing decided to follow me. As soon as I started pedaling back, a wave of panic surged through my body. I didn't dare look back, but the feeling of being pursued was overwhelming. Every pedal stroke felt like a battle against my own fear, and the trail I knew so well had turned into a labyrinth of shadows and darkness. The wind whistled through the trees, but it sounded more like whispers, as if the forest itself was urging me to run. The sky had darkened, and the environment around me seemed to close in, the trees appearing to grow, their branches intertwining above me, blocking out what little light remained. With every turn, it felt like the figure was right behind me, its sinister steps matching the frantic pace of my escape. I was pedaling as fast as I could, my legs burning from the effort, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of the bike's tires crushing dry leaves and snapping twigs underfoot echoed along the trail, but all I could think about was getting as far away from that place as possible. Suddenly, I began to hear something else, a sound that didn't belong to the forest or my bike. They were fast footsteps, running parallel to the trail, as if the figure was keeping pace with me among the trees. Terror drove me to go even faster. Despite the exhaustion, despite the pain. I had to get out of there. Every second felt like an eternity, and the end of the trail still seemed too far away. My hands were sweaty, gripping the handlebars tightly, my eyes fixed on the path ahead, trying not to lose control of the bike. The sound of the footsteps continued, sometimes getting closer, sometimes fading, but never disappearing completely. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the clearing that marked the end of the trail. One last turn, and I would be out of that nightmare. With a final push, I pedaled even faster, nearly losing my balance in my haste to escape. When I reached the clearing, I raced off the trail and kept biking all the way to my house, not looking back even once. I arrived home, threw my bike to the ground, and ran inside, locking the door behind me. I was out of breath, my entire body trembling with adrenaline. I went straight to the living room window, peering out, expecting to see the figure emerge from the trees at any moment, but nothing appeared. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just left behind.